and learning about what the recruitment needs are, and really trying to put together a plan or a strategy that best helps each employer meet their needs. You know, some employers need a pipeline of interns to fill their full-time openings. Some people need a lot of postgraduate students. And again, it could be a variety of all different majors and backgrounds. So one thing that I'm really excited about is just when I get to travel out into the different communities. And so I was out, I guess, in the Richmond area where I met Kendall, and to really kind of learn how we can be of service. And so Kendall and I were talking about all the different individual districts and some of the challenges that you each have. And we thought to have some type of training such as this would be beneficial. So that's what we're going to do today. And before I get started, I'm going to ask Kayla to introduce herself.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kayla Branson, and I serve as an assistant director in our office on our team of professional development and experiential programs. So essentially, that just means that I work really closely with our cooperative education and internship program, which is likely what I'll be chatting with you all most about today. We have students that are in traditional co-ops, in part-time internships, full-time internships, and a program with us where we provide some support to their employers, the students, and get faculty involved as well. So we can chat a little bit about what that program looks like a little later on today. And I was seeing all the different regions. I'm originally, I was born in Virginia, in Southside Virginia, out in Brunswick County. So I was trying to see if I recognized any of the districts popping up. But thank y'all for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can help connect you with some student talent.
Okay, excellent. And so I really want this to kind of be a little informal. Should you have any questions at all, I really want to provide the information that's most beneficial to each of you. So I do have some questions that I'm going to go through. I'm going to show you some things through a shared screen. But again, please feel free to put questions in the chat and to make sure I get to those questions as we move forward. So the first question is, can there be a discussion about career fairs, the value, timing, and process, and then what makes sense for you all? So I think one of the bigger challenges that I think you face is that you're all independently run, and you all are independently trying to do your recruitment. Typically, if you come to a career fair, if multiple of you would come and be set up, you certainly can do that. But one thing that I would try to think about is kind of what is less confusing to our students. To the students, you're one organization, but you may be in different areas or different districts. So you might consider, if you wanted to rotate and you all each represented the organization as a whole, and you just funneled resumes to the appropriate districts for follow-up. But again, we can kind of work out those types of things moving forward. But career fairs at Virginia Tech are a very real thing. I know there is a lot of things that you can read that says career fairs are dead, career fairs don't work anymore. I can tell you that's not the case at Virginia Tech. We have about 30 roughly different career fairs between spring and summer. The one thing that's a little different at Virginia Tech is that we, the Career Center, do not manage the vast majority of those career fairs. So I am going to share my screen. So on the Virginia Tech Career and Professional webpage, there's most of the information I'm actually going to talk about can be seen on this website. So again, it's just the Virginia Tech Career and Professional Development. And if you scroll down, you'll see a link that says career fairs. And again, it's fall and spring. Typically, most of our career fairs are both fall and spring. And so I'm going to look at fall. Now, this would be fall 2023 because fall 2024 have not been posted yet. But the way these fall will be very, very similar. So the two career fairs that I want to point out to you are the Natural Resources and Environmental Career Fair, which was September the 27th. And I also reached out to my counterpart inside this college to make him aware that you would be interested to connect with his students. Because I think many of the students that you're looking to connect to probably fall within this college. So if you scroll down, you can see employers who participated. So these are the employers that participated and the types of students that they were looking to recruit. So if you see companies and students that you think would fit in your organization, then this obviously might be a place that you would want to attend. The other fair would be, see, we have so many, it's hard to find them. The College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. So again, this was on February the 7th. So just actually a couple of weeks ago. And actually the Natural Resources Fair was yesterday for the spring. And again, for these students, they have a lot of those students are going to professional school. So at their job fair, they have a lot of schools that these students might progress to. But if you scroll down, you also see the employers that were there and the major interests of those employers. So again, there could be certainly other pockets within the university that you'd want to get involved in. But I'm thinking probably these would be the two main areas that you might want to get involved in. Now, one way that we can help you is just, before you even go to a career fair, I'm going to stop that right. Before you even go to a career fair, we can help you make connections within those academic departments. So within all the academic departments at Virginia Tech and all the various colleges, if it's engineering, business, natural resources, agriculture, we would have contacts that we can help connect you to. And I'm going to jump around a little bit here because I know one of the questions talks about Handshake. And so we'll talk about Handshake, but posting on Handshake is an important thing, but it's equally as important to actually have some networking contacts within the colleges that you want to recruit in. Okay. And so we can help you through all of that. One thing that I was talking to John Freeborn, who works with the College of Natural Resources, he even said that if you wanted to come and have a day, just for your organization, again, not all of you, obviously, but just one table with a banner that's representing the whole organization and talking about all the various opportunities in all the different districts. You can network with faculty members and with students, generate some excitement and some interest, and just kind of use that as a funnel to create student interest that may come in and then go out to all the various districts, depending on the location the student might have an interest in. So I really think that would be one thing to think about is what your branding will be on campus. Do you want to be branded as 47 unique and individual entities, or one, and then with opportunities in 47 entities? But again, we can kind of work through what that might look like. But a lot of organizations that we work with are similar in structure. And it does work better to have a single brand on campus as a funnel out to all the individual entities, because otherwise it gets a little confusing. The timing and process of career fairs. Generally speaking, it's fairly early in the academic year. But again, each college is a little bit different. College of Natural Resources, is a fairly small college. But I would say, the career fairs, if you go to that, or if you have your own recruiting day, but I would say it's never too early to recruit for summer internships. Many of our students are getting summer internships in the fall career fairs and in fall recruiting. But I'm actually going to hand it over to Kayla and kind of get her thoughts on when she's seen a lot of our students getting recruited for internships, and kind of how that process is working in various colleges.
Absolutely. For the purpose of our cooperative education and internship program, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, and we can always provide you with additional information after this meeting, we did set up some student enrollment and hiring deadlines based on when we see students often getting recruited on campus, how long it can take them to work out plans for an internship during a semester. And for the summer, depending on housing, and as Jim mentioned, they may have a interest in a particular location because of that location, or because they need to live at home, wherever that may be. That might be what is financially feasible for them. So I'm happy to share those in the chat. But we do have recommendations that hiring for internships and co-ops be finalized for summer by April 1st, for fall by July 15th, and for spring by November 1st. So we do have some deadlines we can share out. And those are really because of challenges that we've seen for organizations and students trying to figure out all of the details of their internship or their co-op position, and getting it ready in time that meets your needs and also meets the students' needs based on whatever semester it may be. Jim mentioned the timing of the spring fairs for our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and our College of Natural Resource and Environment. The College of Agriculture and Life Science had just started up their career fair this past fall. Again, it was first time in a while. It was really great fair, and they did it again this spring. So they do have plans to do another one this fall. I was trying to see, they just sent me the date the other day, and I already can't find it in my email. So we're happy to connect with you all about that, though, if that seems like a good fit. But I would say that the students in that College of Natural Resource and Environment, Jim shared a little bit about that. They have great support from their college and our employer relations team. They're pretty heavily recruited, I would say, at that fair. It's pretty important to that college, that particular fair. But also because they are so well networked in their organization, that opportunity Jim shared about getting into a space in their academic department, I think would be a great opportunity to catch those interns. They are definitely preparing over summer to hopefully be hired in fall for summer internships the following year. So it does seem very early, but that is not uncommon for those students. They're certainly still coming to those career fairs in the spring, but I personally, from the students that we've worked with, I would say they're more so going to those spring career fairs looking for full-time job opportunities, and that those fall career fairs are really important for trying to secure students in internships and co-ops for these particular fields.
Okay, perfect. And I know one of the questions is just, how do you set up an internship program? How do you even get started? And I am going to share my screen again. So again, this is on the drop down from our website. And we have two guides here. Guide for employers to create an effective internship program. Again, I don't have time to kind of walk through all of this. I just want to show you where it is and kind of show you the stuff, that information that's in the guide. But there's a lot of information on just how to begin an internship, where to get started, things to think about, concerns that interns might have, an orientation checklist, how to supervise an intern. So again, this is kind of your nuts and bolts of just basic information on, how do you get started, how to recruit, how to develop an internship job description. Again, we would have information as well. And again, following this, in this meeting, we're just going to give you some basic information. If any of you want to really drill down and get more detailed information, Kayla and her team has a lot of other links that she can provide to kind of take this even further to help you as you get started. But again, it's just a lot of information that you can read through, how to get started. Handshake. And I know I'm gonna go a little quick because I see it's already like 20 after we just got started. So I want to cover a lot of information. So I want to, so Handshake is absolutely a place that you need to be familiar with. Handshake is a tool to where you can post jobs. You can hold, you can do a lot of things in Handshake. For most of you, primarily you're going to use the post jobs. If you do not know what Handshake is, in fact, I can send a link following this to Kendall, and maybe she can share it out to the larger group. But you can create your own profile. You can post jobs, and what I would ask any of you, if you post a job in Handshake, send me an email. Say, hey, Jim, just posted these 2 internships in Handshake. Because while we would love to think that all of our students are checking all of the jobs in Handshake, we will post close to 200,000 jobs in Handshake this year. So the vast majority of jobs get no student applications. So just the mere fact of posting, that's the barest of minimum, but you need to do that. Okay, so the job needs to be posted. And if the job is, if the link to the job is on your internal website and you want the student to apply there, still have maybe just have one Handshake profile that links it back to your website. Okay, and again, we can walk you through this afterwards if we need to. But again, send me the jobs once you do that, and then I can send them out to the academic departments. As I said, I have contacts. I can send it out. They often have listservs or different ways to make it available to their students, but we do want it out there on Handshake. What tips do we have recruiting our workforce? Focus on ag and conservation. Again, I think the tips are have a really good job posting that's attractive to our college students. If you don't know how to do that, again, there are some guides on effectively writing a job posting, or just send me a note and say, Jim, can you look at our posting and tell us what you think? But then also know who the key people are in the university that you're recruiting. So now you know me, you know Kayla, but if you're really wanting to recruit certain types of students, there might be a student group or student organization that you'd want to get connected to. There might be a faculty member that works very closely with the work that you do. And so we want to find those people that can help you get information out more directly to students. On a campus of 30,000 plus students, the hardest part right now really is getting the attention to the students. So we can work with you to kind of find those pockets where we can't guarantee success, but we can help you increase the odds of success, if that makes sense. Also, tips for recruiting. I know, maybe we should take a back seat and what is an internship? Because again, with 47 different districts, many of you may have paid internships. Some of you may have internships for credit. Some of you may have unpaid internships. If it's not consistent across the board, which again, since you're independently, I'm sure it's not consistent, that could be confusing to students because they may go into one job posting and say it's paid, another one it might be for credit, and another one might be unpaid. So again, I think it's important to kind of take a larger look at what students are seeing. But again, paid internships is by far the preferable method. Internship for credit, typically speaking, unless the student has a requirement that they need internship credits, that would not be in the benefit of the student to have an internship for credit, because most all of these, I'm assuming, would be during the summer. And if the student were to get internship credit for working for you during the summer, the student actually has to pay additional tuition for those credit hours. So unless it's a requirement of the program, it's definitely not in the interest of the student to do a summer internship for credit. Kayla, do you have anything to add to that?
Just that I agree. I do think that paid internships, one, are going to help you attract good talent. Students in that field are getting offers, at other places locally and not locally. But I do think that keeping talent in Virginia is super exciting, and the students are often asking for local opportunities. They just don't know what's available out there. So if you're getting your name out there, you're well branded with the groups of students that you're looking for, and you do have some paid opportunities, that's just going to help with retention later on as well, getting them in for an internship and hopefully retaining them for full-time work. I will give a quick plug that our program kind of gives them the best of both worlds. So the CEIP program I mentioned earlier, that is here in Jim and I's office, I am the instructor for that program. I work closely with students and employers in that program, but essentially it is 0 credits, meaning that students, regardless of what time of year it is, whether it's fall, spring, summer, they are not paying per credit hour to get some additional help and guidance during their experience. So they are connected to us. We do provide some development opportunities for them. And we, based on what employers are sharing with us, if an employer partner reaches out to us and says, I have a student in your program and they are really struggling with professional communication, we could really have them get some extra coaching here. We can help you with that. But the student's not having to pay anything to participate in this on their end. The employer's not having to pay for their student to participate in the program. And it does provide them with that development opportunity that some of those 4 credit programs traditionally offered, but for no cost. So it is a really great opportunity for both the employer and the student. And we are happy to speak more in depth about benefits of that program. But if you are traditionally doing those 4 credit internships and are looking for a way for the student to still benefit from this on their transcript, or have that additional kind of academic support, this is a great program option for you.
And kind of going back to the kind of the nuts and bolts of the recruitment, again, I need to stop sharing my screen. Let me go back. So again, on this same tab, you'll see a guide for employers to recruitment. Let me go back. And again, I'm not going to be able to go through each screen, but just to let you know that it's here and it's available for you to look at. So again, a lot of what we've talked about can be found here. A couple of things that could be important: demographic information, all the undergraduate majors. So when we talk about different colleges, this will tell you what majors are under each college. It's not always as intuitive as you may think, but I do think most of your interests could be in the Ag and Natural Resources College, but we have other majors as well that might pique your interest. So again, feel free to kind of look through this and go, well, gosh, maybe this major in the College of Science might be an area of interest too. And again, we can help you with all of these different areas. Information on Handshake is in here. Again, tips to get started on Handshake. We do have an on-campus interviewing program. And pretty much this can be done virtually as well. So we still call it on campus, but it can be on campus or virtual, to where you pick a day that you want to do interviews. So if you want to do interviews, say on, excuse me, if it's in the fall, you want to do it October 15th, or you want to do it March 18th, whichever day, you pick a day, you'd contact me and my team and say, Jim, we want to set up an interview day. March 18th, we want our interviews to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. We want them to end at 4 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We want them to be 30 minutes each or 45 minutes each. And you kind of set up a day of a shell of a day. We would then get your jobs. You say, hey, these are the 3 jobs we want to do interviews with. We then promote on Handshake and also through the departments. We do our very best to collect resumes of students that would be interested to interview with you. We have 27 interview rooms in this office. So if you wanted to come to Blacksburg, you'd have a private interview room. Students would come here, you would do the interviews. If you wanted to do the interviews virtually, all of our interview rooms are set up with high-speed wired monitors. So as you are working with the student, you could ask the student, do you have a private location in order to do this, Zoom interview? Often students have difficulty finding a private location, or their roommates walking behind them or something. So you could actually recommend to them to contact us, and we'll give the student one of our interview rooms where they would have a private space to interview with you virtually. So this program talks a little bit about that. There are some date requirements, talks about here. Tips for success, things to think about when you're doing on-campus interviewing. Again, information sessions. We have 2 classrooms. If you wanted to come to campus, do an evening workshop or an evening talk to students, you can reserve one of our rooms. Talks about that here. But anything that you see here, any questions, just reach out to me. We can walk through it. Presentation to student organizations, career fairs, a little bit about the co-op and internship program. So all that information is in this guide that's on our website. So I know I went through that super quick. The main point is just to show you where it is and to let you know the information that is in that guide. Okay. How long should an internship be? And what's the ideal timeline and schedule for an intern? And I know Kayla went through much of the timelines, but what our students are typically looking for, if it's in the summer, typically a full-time, and it doesn't have to be 40 hours. I mean, some interns are maybe 32 hours, 33 hours, but typically, especially if our students are relocating for the summer for an internship, they're not really looking for 12 hours a week or 20 hours a week. Typically they're looking for a full-time opportunity, and it's generally, Kayla, what, 12 to 15 weeks, would you say?
I am actually including a quick little flyer in the chat. I'm trying to get it to upload. We have, for our full-time, we've got 32 to 40 hours a week. And our part-time is 4 to 31 hours per week. And for summer, I believe the requirement is 12 weeks if it's full-time. And for other semesters, I think it is, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it is 13 to 15 weeks.
And just to a little bit of a clarification. So Kayla's program provides the student with professional development training. The student that you have from Virginia Tech is tethered to the university through Kayla's program. However, you're not required to use Kayla's program for an intern. So if you identify a student and they come to work for you during the summer, a lot of the deadlines and qualifications that Kayla is talking about may not apply But again, there's a lot of benefit of having that student tethered to the university, because we have, if you as a supervisor, if you were to have an issue with a student, say the student thinks it's totally ridiculous to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning and they just don't understand that, you could contact Kayla's team and they can work with that student on professional development. If they have a conflict with someone, Kayla's team can work with that student. If you as the employer has a problem, you can work with Kayla's team. And again, so it's a three-way relationship versus you just having a student with that not being tethered to the university. Kendall, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
I think you started to answer it. I guess there's been a few direct questions to me about the CEIP program. Uh, do you have to pay the intern to be involved in CEIP is what I got. And I think you addressed the last one in that answer too, but there's been a few direct questions to me to get a little more understanding of the requirements on the district for participation. Do they have, one of the questions I have is, do we submit like a plan or a syllabus to CEIP to handle this relationship?
So I'll jump in. In terms of CEIP participation, one of the benefits is that you don't have to do anything like that. There's no plan that is created. There is an opportunity to be a partner with CEIP, but we also have employers that send students out to work with us without a formal partnership. But regardless, they're getting some pretty great benefits. We have coursework developed. It's very minimal in terms of the amount of work. We want them to focus on the work they're doing with the employing organization. And the assignments or the coursework that we have on our end that they're completing is helping them reflect on skill sets with your organization. So you're not having to submit like a plan or anything like that. We're taking care of the development piece on our end. However, as the employer, if you, like Jim mentioned, have identified some areas where you're having trouble kind of coaching this student to the level of professionalism or the level of communication that you're needing from them, the level of leadership, we have opportunities where we can provide them with some additional coaching opportunities on our end as well. So it's just another source of support for you. The full-time program, we rarely will accept students into the full-time program that aren't paid. And that is the one that is 32 to 40 hours per week over essentially an entire semester, whether that's fall, spring, or summer. However, our part-time program, we do accept unpaid internships into that program. Typically, we're often trying to work with the employer to figure out ways that that student could be paid or have a stipend provided to them or housing or some sort of benefit so that they aren't doing the work completely unpaid. However, we do accept unpaid internships into that part-time program, and the coursework is the same unless they are a short term. You're only having them for like 4 to 6 weeks. We cut down on the coursework a little bit for them, so they still have some development, but they're still focusing on you all and not their sole focus on us.
Yeah, so it's really it's a benefit to the employer. It's certainly not a requirement of, I mean, honestly, most summer internships, an employer might find a student at a job fair and never come through our program. So it's not but it's just it's something that's out there. It does show up on the student's transcript. So Virginia Tech is moving toward a system that transcriptable internships may be a requirement. So this is a program that students can go through to get that internship on their transcript. But it's definitely not a requirement. Now, if you were to do a co-op, so I know one of the questions is difference in a co-op and an internship, and I'm gonna give it a high level. A co-op is typically a multiple term, whereas an internship is typically a single term, more likely in the summer or part-time during an academic session. A co-op, if you had a student who worked all summer, did a great job, and you said, gosh, I wish I could keep that student through fall semester, you can do that. That would be a summer fall co-op. Now for a co-op, the student really has to register through the co-op program, and you, the employer, would want that student to register, because if that student is not registered, all you have is an unenrolled Virginia Tech student who's no longer a student at Virginia Tech. The co-op program keeps them enrolled as a full-time student, even though they're working for you full-time. Now, typically, that's typically an engineering thing where engineering students do co-ops, but any student on our campus is eligible to do a co-op. They would work with their academic department on how they would make up their classes and if it delays their graduation date, but it would be a multiple term. And again, more typically is turning into like a spring, summer, or summer, fall. So it's kind of like a 6-month experience, but it can be a rotating experience. A traditional co-op is a 3-term rotational program. At Virginia Tech, there's no set schedule. It's whatever you, the employer, would want and what the student would want. But in a very tight nutshell, I mean, Kayla, would you agree? I mean, that on a tight nutshell, that would be kind of what our co-op program is.
I really
It
appreciate that
wouldn't let
background.
me off mute, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Yes, and I will say John Freeborn that Jim mentioned over in the College of Natural Resource and Environment, he has been supportive of both internships and co-ops with their students. So we actually do see, as Jim mentioned, it's primarily engineering in those traditional rotational co-ops that are full-time, but he's actually been pretty supportive of co-op. And so they've had some students in those disciplines that would certainly work well for you all in those opportunities. So if that's something, if you're wondering, is a co-op or an internship better for our organization based on the kind of work we have? I do remember seeing a question in the chat somewhere about the definition of an intern and what might other definitions be and things like that. If you're interested in just trying to figure out what works best for your organization, that's something that our team is happy to talk with you with. My supervisor, Becca Scott, she couldn't be here today. She often will chat with folks about what, based on work you have for the student and the level of responsibility you're hoping to instill in them, the level of ownership you're hoping they'll take over projects, and work you have to do, you would like them to complete. We can help you kind of figure out if an internship or a co-op or a full-time or a part-time position might be a better fit.
Yeah, well, elaborate on that a little bit more because you're right. I know Jim's going through the list of questions we got ahead of time, but there are some really relevant ones in the chat box. And without holding you to anything you say, to Megan's question, right? Is there another term that we might consider when seeking students to do work at their office? Is something like a seasonal position a better approach? Because Megan, you're welcome to come off mute and ask me your questions, but I know you've been advertising some of your positions that way too. Is there value in terms of the terminology?
Yeah, and I will say, so I got in a little pickle because I was using students consistently to do work, hard work in the fields, and it was work that otherwise my staff would be doing. And so I didn't early on realize that was not, and I was not paying them. I mean, I am in the Shenandoah Valley in the heart of, 3 universities, and they come hungry for these opportunities. And so, it was easy to find students who would do this because they wanted stuff for their resume. And then I quickly learned after doing that for 3 or 4 summers, oh gosh, that's a legal issue and problem. So I had to kind of restructure things because now I had to find money to pay these people, and I needed 4 students to do what I was doing in the summer. So I have now switched it to seasonal positions. And that's working well, but I'm just thinking, outside of my summer seasonal work and knowing about what other districts are likely looking for students to do, it really is maybe data entry work or work that our staff would otherwise be doing. Yes, it's giving them opportunities to learn, but much of the work that many districts are seeking is probably replacing or offsetting the work of our staff. So I'm concerned about using the term internships. And since I have done it wrong, I don't want others to get in that pickle and put themselves in a legal situation.
For these seasonal positions that you mentioned, you kind of adjusted the internship to a seasonal position. Are those seasonal positions paid?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I mean, we can certainly sit down. I think that it would be a great thing to talk about co-op versus internship and things like that. But honestly, some of the work you're talking about during like the year you mentioned outside of the summer, that it is work you would be assigning to a full-time person. It is sounding very much like it could be a co-op position. And our co-ops, traditionally co-op used to be very much like you go to school, you take like in fall semester, you go off to work, and then fall you go back to school, and spring you go back to work, and it would rotate between like spring, summer, fall. But now we're seeing sometimes they'll just do like a summer and fall back to back. Sometimes people are still calling just a one like fall or a summer or spring experience a co-op. But what we feel like is the true definition of it now, knowing that co-op is more flexible than it used to be, is if you are planning to provide some training on the front end and you are giving that student a lot of responsibility like you would a full-time employee, you're essentially treating them like a full-time employee, knowing they're only there for a short time. That does kind of align better with our definition of co-op. And those students are typically paid a little bit better than our interns at times. They're there full-time hours. It can be during a fall or a spring semester in addition to a summer. And they are taking on a heavy load of responsibility. They're still, what is important is, regardless of whether it's an internship where they're maybe just getting some project-based work, maybe you're assigning them like this project, someone's overseeing them, giving them feedback on it, then moving on to something else, instead of kind of giving them something that they might be working on for the whole semester. That they're taking more responsibility, regardless of which piece. We would want them to have like a supervisor and or mentor that is going to still give them feedback on their work. We want them to get that positive feedback if they're doing a great job, but also that critical feedback if you're seeing key areas where they need to focus on some improvement. So someone that is there for them to help kind of guide them, because this is likely for many of them their first part-time or full-time work experience. When we're seeing less and less students coming to college with that work experience. So regardless, we would want that like supervision and mentor piece there, so that there is someone giving them advice and feedback, and hearing like if the student's like, I saw that you have some folks working on this, I'd love to get involved with that. So maybe you're still having them do the work you intended for them to do, but providing opportunities for them to jump into other areas and take on other types of work as well based on their interests. So that's kind of what we're thinking of when we're wanting that supervision and that mentor component. But some of what you're talking about actually does sound like it could possibly be a better fit for a co-op.
Yeah, and I would offer this: when you're sitting down talking to a student, I mean, you have kind of the duties and responsibilities that you know need to be done, right? And that's what you're recruiting for. Well, I would be talking to the student on what is it that you want out of this seasonal employment, this internship, this co-op. What's important to you to learn from this experience? And let them be responsible for, say, 20% of their duties. Maybe they want to learn X, Y, and Z. So you maybe structure your experience to do what you need to be done, but then you also incorporate some of the students' interest into that job as well. Because you want to make sure the student is actually learning what they want to learn. And it could be something like, I want to run a meeting. I want to do public speaking. It might be, what skills are they looking to increase? And then kind of build that into their daily and weekly responsibilities, to where they feel like they're making a contribution, not just for you, but also for themselves.
In the interest of time, Jim, I know you've been covering that one. You've got some more in-depth questions that have been generated in the chat box too. So let's try to tackle some of those also. I've gotten a couple questions. I think I see one from Sharon too, about really in terms of paid internships, maybe a loaded question. What's a preferred rate to help us be competitive? And is there a cap on what we could provide? Is it better to do a stipend versus a salary hour rate? Any guidance you can give on that front?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have some data on first term internship salary rates. But again, it's going to vary wildly from colleges to departments. So if we're talking, so if you're talking about the College of Natural Resources, we probably have smaller data. So I would probably want to reach out to John Freeborn to kind of see what he's hearing that his students are getting. I mean, I don't know, Kayla, if you would know that specific. I mean, I know we have a little bit of data, but I think John may have. I mean, certainly minimum wage, which be, you know, a requirement. But, you know, I think it's going to vary. I mean, again, from location to location, it's going to vary, right? If it's Northern Virginia, if it's South Side, if it's Hampton Roads, if it's Richmond, if it's Blacksburg, you know, I think, you know, is the student going to need housing? You know, I think it just has to be competitive, and that's going to vary really from location to location. But I think as you get connected inside the departments, because I don't necessarily know what those students are getting on an internship. I mean, generally speaking, I would say the range would be $15 to $20 an hour, but I don't know that would be true for those students. Kayla, I mean, what do you think?
I think for those of you that seem like you're offering work that you've had to transfer into seasonal positions that might be a better fit for co-op, those might be a little bit higher than some of the internship work that you're providing that might even just be part-time. So they might be getting paid a little more competitively. And I saw Sharon added to the chat that you all pay $20 an hour. I agree with Jim. It's very locationally based. So, and we prep students for that. If they're coming to our program or coming to our office looking for a position, we're letting them know that if your friend is in Northern Virginia and you are in Southwest Virginia, you are probably getting paid very differently, and that is okay. But John probably does, I agree with Jim, have information specifically on like that's some of the specific majors that we could see you all recruiting from. So I would hesitate to share any of that data. But I will say we need to think about the kind of work too. So if you're leaning more toward, I really want them to have that additional responsibility, co-op like environment, they're paid a little bit more than like a part-time intern. And then that also varies on location. So yeah, it is odd, but I bet we could get some info from John that helps narrow it down a little bit.
No, I hope that's something we can follow up on too. And in that sense, it is as much for you to learn from Jim as from each other. So Sharon, thank you for sharing your $20 an hour. I have a district who direct messaged me. Is there a restriction then if they can't necessarily pay the hourly to do something like a scholarship or a stipend?
I mean, I think certainly as a nonprofit, you have more leeway to do things than a for-profit company would. Because I mean, for a for-profit company, there are some legalities as far as those types of things, but a nonprofit, I think you could do that. It just comes down to how competitive you're going to be in the recruitment effort. I mean, one thing as far as a stipend for housing, you know, if you had a lower wage, but you were able to, you know, if you had an agreement with a local apartment complex who could, because I mean, it's hard for a student to get a 3-month lease anywhere in the world. So if they're not from that area, housing is just a huge barrier. So I mean, so stipends are a thing. I mean, some people might do a stipend, but again, I think we're really pushing for paid internships. And so I think for anyone who isn't able to do a paid internship and has maybe an alternative idea, just to get with us individually and just kind of talk through. And again, what I don't know is, again, the university's big, right? So there could be pockets of the university that students are doing, you know, unpaid or stipends or doing something different that we may not be aware of. So I can't speak for every department at Virginia Tech as far as, you know, what may be acceptable or not acceptable.
Absolutely fair. And the next question I think Sharon had might also be one we need to follow up on. But I noticed in the list of employers that were coming to your career fairs, you had folks like state agencies like the Department of Forestry that were attending some of them. Districts would be very similar in terms of a quasi-government fair. If there's any guidance you can offer in terms of how those that are equal opportunity employers are handling it, are they coming there and directly advertising at the job fair and potentially hiring from that pool? I think that might be helpful information to know how those types of similar organizations are handling their career fair.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, right? I mean, it's whatever you're able to do. I mean, some organizations like that come and their whole goal is just to funnel resumes into an applicant tracking system that will be reviewed at a later date for phone interviews per se. Some people will stay on campus and do on-campus interviews and extend offers fairly quickly. It's just really whatever the policy is or whatever is possible. But for many, they're coming just really to promote and funnel resumes into an applicant tracking system where the student has to go through a formal application process in order to be considered for an interview. Many companies will do a screening interview just based off of a resume.
We've got a really great question in the chat box from Willie Wood out of Northern Virginia Soil and Water District, and hoping you can tackle this one a bit for us. In an effort to introduce more diversity and equity into a district's work team, are there any recommendations or tools your services provide? And Willie, feel free to come off and elaborate.
I mean, we can definitely help you get connected to our cultural centers and to different pockets of the university that's diverse organizations, diverse groups. We definitely can make those connections to help generate that type of interest.
Thank you.
I think I have tried to capture some of the chat box questions. I can't promise I have hit all of them. So really, I know we're at 10:55. Feel free to come off mute, ask Jim and Kayla any questions you might have. And if we don't, if there are ones, Jim, you think we missed that were submitted in registration that we really need to cover, but really this is y'all's opportunity to engage a little deeper before maybe contacting them one-on-one.
Yeah, and I would say for any of you, if you have follow-up specific questions or things, feel free to reach out. We can schedule 15, 20, 30 minutes just to talk about your district. If you want to get involved, again, if it's diversity groups, if it's contacts, whatever you would want. If you want to come to campus, we can set up in-person meetings with different faculty members, different, I mean, there's a lot we can do. We're just kind of touching the nuts and bolts of recruiting right in this call, but depending on what your interests are, there's a whole other layer of if you want to get involved with faculty members or classes through sponsorships. But again, some of that takes dollars that you may or may not have. But always feel free just to reach out individually and we can kind of talk through your situation.
Definitely know there's some questions in here too that potentially we will work on doing some additional training that come from the more HR standpoint in terms of equal opportunity employers, maybe things that you legally can or can't ask for employees, or I imagine interns also. But Jim, to one question I have in here too, should you be asking interns the same types of questions you are for, would you use the normal recruitment process in terms of interviews and questions and the same screenings as if they were being hired?
Maybe not. I mean, I think a lot of the same questions maybe, but I would certainly tweak it, knowing that for many of these students that you're interviewing for internships, this may be their very first work experience. So I wouldn't necessarily ask them the same in-depth questions that you would ask a regular person. But again, when you get to that point, those would be great things that we can kind of go back and forth and kind of feed off of each other on what kind of questions you might ask. But one thing that I would really think would be a great takeaway, you could have a Virginia Association of Soil and Water Day in the College of Natural Resources. It could be promoted out to the whole college. You could have a table. You could probably get into some classrooms. You could have an evening information session, but you could have a standalone day. And, John actually recommended that. He would help you coordinate that. And that would kind of get a lot of information out to a lot of people fairly easily. But I think things like that would be something that I would ask you to consider.
And that's a great idea. And I think the association on behalf of districts can certainly try to help with that awareness and something like that. But districts on the line recognizing we might really want to lean into you, that while we're there on campus, having someone from the field actually join us to speak to the role that you would do at the local district level would be helpful.
Absolutely.
We're pretty close to the top of the hour, so if there's a question I missed or someone has one last burning question, this is really your chance. Come off mute and learn from Kayla and Jim, or if you have a question that you can open up broader to all those on the line. You've got a good 25 folks here that have their own unique ways of handling it at their own local district that we can learn from too.
Excuse me, this is Sharon with Hanover Caroline District. I just wanted to know if other districts would be interested, or the VASWCD, in going in on a booth during one of these career fairs. So it's not just Hanover Caroline, it's other districts that are represented.
Sharon, if there's interest for districts, the association is all into trying to help with this.
But at the very least, send me your jobs, email me your jobs, and I can get them out to the students. I mean, that would be the first step. Just, get your jobs posted on Handshake, or at least a link to your website, or and then just email me your jobs. Kayla and her team, they have an internship network they can get the information out to, and we can get them out to the departments.
Thank you, Melissa. I think I'm hearing from a couple of you that really might be something we want to pursue on behalf of districts. And we've got a few folks like Sharon and Melissa we could potentially lean on to help in that effort. How do you frame internships differently based on different audiences? Certainly, I think I've seen a question from Terry, and I want to make sure I'm capturing it correctly. Anything that would preclude framing an intern for a college student while also having a local high school student do an internship in the office at the same time, when they could very well be doing some of the similar responsibilities, maybe just at different levels?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is to begin to figure out what would students be most interested in. I mean, why come to you for this work experience? What's in it for the student? I mean, I know you have certain things you need to get done, but it has to be attractive to the student. So I would frame it that way. What's the benefit? What are the students going to learn, and why are they going to be better off and more marketable from working in your office? And that's kind of the frame from the student's point of view. If they're doing similar work side by side with a high school student, they may not see that as the most beneficial use of their time.
All right, I've got 11:02. I really thank y'all for taking some time to dive into this a little bit more today, understanding and learning from Jim and Kayla some opportunities that can really enhance your own district work. And I think it's given us all some food for thought on how we can improve our own processes at the local district, but that also how us as an association can help support the greater good of districts. And really am appreciative of y'all coming online to really just start this conversation, because I really don't think this is the end of it by any means. I did drop Jim's contact information in the chat. He did offer to speak with some of you one-on-one to share your job postings. So I hope you take advantage of that and drop it again, since it's probably up higher for folks. If you want, Jim, can you hang on the line a few minutes, maybe after?
Absolutely.
So folks, right, we'll stop the recording in a moment, and thank you all for joining. But if you have a one-on-one question perhaps and want to hang on the line a few minutes and talk to Jim specifically on something, just know that we're going to keep that resource on the line for you to be able to speak individually with him, even if it's got a few folks in the background. Thanks, Jim.